Hey, we've been in this series called Pain, and we talked last week about what we call the pain equation. Now, we've been talking about a guy in the Bible. His name is, does anyone know what his name is? Job, right? Job, it's spelled like J-O-B, like what? Like job, but it's not job, it's Job, right? You can pull my mic back just a little bit. It's not Job, it's job. And we talked a little bit about this idea of the pain equation, okay? So when we're thinking about this idea of pain, and we're trying to figure out how to apply it to our lives, we saw that Job, he modeled how to do it. He literally showed us exactly how we should go through pain. Now, the question isn't whether or not we're going to, it's when we're going to. Because everyone here has experienced pain in your life. Maybe you hurt your ankle, I don't know. Maybe that boy at school, he didn't like me. He didn't like me back, and I was crying in my room, right? Hey, boys, don't you judge. You do the same thing to the girls. I know exactly what it's like, okay? Listen, we go through pain. Everyone goes through pain. So it's not a question of it's not a question of if we go through pain. It's a question of when we go through pain. So last week we talked about this idea of the pain equation, which is how often or how big your pain is. If you match that with how much praise you give, just like Job, what will happen is God will give you strength for that. He will give you strength. So we left off talking about Job. What happened to him? Well, he was in this bad situation where he's just chilling, and all of a sudden someone comes to him and says, hell, all your kids just died. He had 10 kids. They all died. Oh, by the way, all your stuff burned down. And all your cattle and all your sheep and all your money, it's gone. People stole it. And in one day, his entire life was over. He was still alive, but he was feeling like he was just in the worst scenario of his life. Like the worst day of your life. And he's there, and he's just frustrated and so in anguish. Like he didn't know what to do. He's so sad in that moment. He went through one of the worst days, I would say, one of the worst days anyone in the Bible or any of us here have ever gone through, where he lost his entire family, all his kids, all at one time. And to top it off, you ever have a bad day where it just gets worse and worse and worse? This is what happens to Job. See, Satan, he's the one who went to God and he said, listen, God, I think Job, the only reason Job follows you is because you give him stuff. That's what Satan said. God's like, okay, take away his stuff. Let's see what he does. So Satan comes, he takes away his stuff, he takes away his kids. He's going through this terrible day. And then on top of it, Satan goes back to God, and this is what it says in Job chapter 2. Satan says this, skin for skin, Satan replied, a man will give all he has for his own life. Now, stretch out your hand and strike his flesh, that's his body, and his bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. And then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. Now, if you don't understand what that means, it means he's having an even worse day. Not only is all his stuff gone, not only is all his family, all his kids are dead, not only is he just left there alone, but now, all of a sudden, he starts developing boils. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a pimple, right? You're getting older, you're starting to get pimples. They're the worst. Imagine a pimple that's 1,000 times bigger all over your entire body, where it's painful to even sit down. It's painful to even move your body. And he's breaking out in so many sores. He grabs a piece of a pot and he just starts scraping himself. That's gross, ain't it? And he sits. Where does he sit? Among the ashes. Why would he sit among the ashes? Why do you think? Because his house is completely burned down. He sits among the ashes. And that shows us as well, not only is he sitting among the place where his house used to be, and he's just sitting there in the dirt, but he's just weeping and crying out. This is the worst day of my life. This is literally the worst day of my life. He had it rough. Now, a lot of us, when something bad happens, what we do is we ask one question. We say, why? Why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? You ever feel like you got like punished a little too much? You'd be like, why, Mom? Why did I get this punishment, right? Or maybe even you didn't get punished, just something happens and it hurts. The first thing it's easy for you to ask is, why is this happening? What's the point of the pain? What's the point of it? Now you go to the doctor and they'll give you a shot and it hurts. At least you can understand the point of the shot. You can understand this is good for me. I can go through this. I can like go through it because I know that in the end it's good for me because there's a purpose and there's a point to the pain. But Job hears in this moment, he goes, what's the point, God? What's the point? I'm sitting here with all these boils on my body, in the ashes of my burnt down house where my kids died and my family is taken and all my stuff is gone. Why, God? What's the point? What's the point? Let's hear a little bit about what Job actually says. Job chapter 3:26. It says this, I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, only turmoil. Like, it's the worst possible situation he could have ever gone through. He has no peace, no quietness, no rest, only turmoil. Why does he say he has no quietness? I'm sure he's quiet, right? He probably lives in the countryside a little bit. It's probably quiet. Why doesn't he feel quietness? Because his heart hurts so bad. When you're in pain, it's hard to relax. It's really hard to relax. I've had injuries before, and I try and lay down, and you can't find a good way to lay down. You're in so much pain. You can't relax. You're only going through turmoil. Job is going through turmoil of his body, but also his heart. It says this in Job 30:18. In his great power, listen to this, God becomes like clothing to me. You'd be like, God's like a shirt? Yeah, he's like a shirt. He's like a shirt that binds the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud, and I'm reduced to dust and ashes. What is he saying? He's like, I feel like I'm being choked out by God. Wow, you don't hear that in church. Be like, how many of you guys want to be choked out by God? Everyone would be like, I don't know, right? He's like, I feel like I'm being choked by God. And who's this? God. I feel like God's just throwing me into the mud. He's just throwing me into the mud and just changing me from a human to now just a bunch of dust and ashes. Like, I feel like nothing. I'm having the worst day of my life. This is terrible. This is not a fun sermon. Someone's like, I came here to church to get encouraged. And then PT pulls up and it's just like, I feel like God's choking me, right? That's how Job felt. That's how he felt. See, it sounds like to me Job is asking this question to God, why? Why me? Why is this happening? What's the point? He's asking, is this fair, God? Is what you're doing fair? Because remember, I don't know if you remember this, at the beginning when we first started talking about Job, we learned that Job was a good guy. He was a good guy. You know what? Even God said, have you seen Job? He's a pretty good guy. He said that to everyone. He's like, hey, look at Job. He's like the best one. He's like the model citizen. Look at how good he is. Have you seen how nice he is? So we know automatically that Job is a good guy. So Job's like, okay, I've been living like pretty decent. God, what's the point of this? Is this fair? Job's discussing this with some people, and he says this, Job 6:24, teach me and I'll be quiet. Show me where I have gone wrong. He's saying, listen, if you can show me what I've done wrong, then I'll take it, but this doesn't seem fair to me, guys. Like, I literally have the worst situation ever. How is this fair at all? And he's asking this question, why, God? Why? You want to know what God answered? Here's what's crazy. He doesn't. God answers Job, but not the way that he doesn't actually answer the question. Job's here in this worst, like, awful moment. And he goes through it. He's going through this whole moment. This book of Job is like a lot of chapters. It's like a big book. And Job's going through all this pain the entire time. And finally, I'm going to skip to the end. Finally, God answers Job. But he doesn't answer and explain that. Let me explain why. Let me show you why it's fair. Job was never explained, ever, even for the rest of his life. We aren't explained whether or not it was fair or unfair. You want to hear what God says back? At the end of the book, this is how he answers. He says this, "And now finally, God answered Job from the eye of a violent storm. He said," this is God talking to Job, ready? "Why do you confuse the issue? Why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about?" Woo! God's sassy here, dude. Why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? Pull yourself together, Job. Stand up on your feet. Stand tall. Now I have some questions for you. God's saying this to Job. And I want some straight answers. Where were you when I created the earth? Tell me, since you know so much. Who decided on its size? Certainly, you'll know that, right? Who came up with the blueprints and the measurements? How was its foundation poured? And who set the cornerstone? So it goes on for a whole nother couple chapters. God's basically going, who do you think you are? Ooh, that sounds like our parents sometimes, right? Yeah? We'll be like, why do we do this? Excuse me? Is that disrespect I hear? We get that a lot. That sounds like our parents. They don't explain whether or not it's fair or not. And God, you'd think God would like level with the guy. You think God would be like, I get it. It's a terrible situation. But you know what God says? Who are you, dog? Who do you think you are? Now we hear this, and to be honest, I don't think this makes me feel very good. Like, this isn't one of those scriptures that's like, you got it, I believe in you. No, this is like one of those that's like, ugh. Like it doesn't feel great to read it. Because you're like, this seems very unfair. Job's going, this is not fair. This is not fair. God, why isn't this fair that this has happened to me? But God doesn't answer me. He doesn't even answer me. So what is the answer? Well, it's really simple. God never promises us that life is going to be fair, ever. And you've already experienced things that aren't fair. Maybe you've been given things at an advantage that other people haven't. That's not fair. But maybe you've also had to experience bad things that else isn't fair either. God never promises in the Bible that life here will be fair, ever. He never says that. And so when Job's going, why is this fair? God's like, I never said it was going to be. I never said it was going to be. See, life is full of things that aren't fair. See, it's not fair that, think about this. You live in a country that has a lot more money than people in Africa. Did you know that? That's not fair. You live in a place where we have safety a lot of times. Not all the time, but compared to a lot of other places. It's not fair that other people have even more than you. Do you know that's not fair? It's not fair. Oh, this is a good one. I'd always feel like this one. It's not so fair that my parents are so strict on me, right? Why do I have the strict parents? Maybe be like, oh, it's not fair that this sibling gets treated better than me. They get more. You don't get mad at them, Mom. That's not fair. We can get so easy. Some people get more success than others. Like, it's not fair. I put up that Instagram post and they got more likes than I did. It's just not fair. We have the same amount of followers. Do people just not? It's not fair. Some people are more talented. Listen, they were born more talented. Did you know that? Some people were just born more talented than us. That's not fair. Some people are born more smart. They're naturally smart. They take like the tests, you know, like the little bubbles you fill in. It's like boom, right answer, boom, right answer, boom, right answer. They don't even have to try. That's not fair. Well, God never, ever promised it would be fair. He didn't. He never promised that life would be fair. Now, when we get caught up in this idea of unfairness, it's like, it's so unfair. We can complain about, oh, it's unfair all day long. The problem with this mindset is it can lead us into a bad cycle of thought. A bad cycle of thought. Now, I'm excited. It's going to be warm coming up soon. I like the summer. Y'all like the summer? You excited for the summer? Right? In the summer, a lot of people go to the fair. Now, I'm making a play on words here. Because when you go to the fair and you're riding the rides, it's awesome. You can get to the Ferris, what's it called? the Ferris wheel, right? And you get on the Ferris wheel and you're with your friends and then you ride it around and it goes like slow, okay? But the worst thing that can happen is you get stuck. You said it. You get stuck. Is that a fear of anyone on a ride? You get stuck, right? So now, when you go down these trains of thoughts, when you go down these thought processes of this is so unfair, you're not riding the Ferris wheel, you're riding the unfairness wheel, right? And the problem is we get stuck on that wheel. We get stuck on those thought processes consistently. We'll be like, this isn't fair, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. God never promised us that it was going to be fair, but He gives us faith, even if it's not fair. What do I mean by that? Is He gives us something to take us through those moments. We talked about Job having worship, and when he prays and worship, God gave him strength. He gives us strength even though it's not fair. And just because something isn't fair doesn't mean it's not good. There's a lot of things that I got in trouble for, my brother didn't, but it was good for me as PT to get in trouble for those things when I was younger. Because I needed to learn, because I'm different than other people, and you're different than other people, and God is treating you different than other people, and life is treating you different than other people. It's all different, and it might not be fair, but you know what it can be? You can have faith, even if it's not fair. You can have faith. That means you can trust in God. You can trust in God. But what happens when we get caught in this unfairness wheel? We get caught in this cycle of unfairness. A couple things happen. The first thing that happens is we are constantly comparing with other people. Constantly comparing with other people. And we compare based upon other people's pain. We'll be like, well, why do they get that and I don't? We constantly are comparing. I remember when I was younger, when my brother first came to live with us because he was adopted, he came in and we're sitting there and he would always count how many like fries or chicken nuggets I got to eat when I was younger. He'd be like, how many do you have? 8. I only have 7. This is so unfair. Life is unfair. And he'd count to make sure. What was he doing in that moment? He was comparing. He's comparing. Now, I know that that's kind of a dumb analogy, but we literally do that all the time. We compare constantly. Look at what they're wearing. Why can't I wear that? Look at how cool they are. How come I can't have that? Boys, here's what boys do. They're so much better at that thing, at that sport, at that game than me. They're so much smarter than me. And we're constantly comparing to other people. And we get focused on them so much and trying to tear them down and trying to maybe lift ourselves up that we don't even understand that we're living and we're starting this comparison and we're stuck on this unfairness wheel. This is unfair. This is unfair. You know, when I was younger, we didn't have iPhones. When I was really young, right? We didn't have iPhones. So now I see a bunch of young people sad that they don't have an iPhone. When I was younger, why wasn't I sad that I didn't have an iPhone? Because I didn't have anyone to compare to. I didn't have anyone to compare to. And when you get caught in this idea of comparing, what happens is it breeds the second point, which is complaining. Ooh. We got some complainers here. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we're all complainers. We just have 2 honest people. Everyone here is a complainer. Be like, why? Go take out the trash. Why, Mom? Why doesn't he have to take out the trash? Oh, I see some of you like, We complain. Why? Because we're comparing. God never said it was going to be fair. Your parents never said this is going to be fair. But just because it's not fair doesn't mean it's not good. It can still be good. God can still use this situation. He can still help you. And we get caught in, it's unfair, and it leads to complaining. You know what complaining does for your life? Nothing. Like nothing at all. It doesn't help you. It doesn't make the situation better. Complaining doesn't make the situation better. It doesn't make it easier. It doesn't help anyone else. Complaining literally just makes the situation worse. It's all it does. It makes the situation harder and harder and harder. So when you feel like you're experiencing pain, it's one thing to be like, this is tough. I need help. God, help me, give me strength, and someone who's complaining. Because comparison always leads to complaining. When we're comparing with other people, why don't I have that they have? Why can't I be as cool? Why can't I have those things or those people in my life? And you start living in this place of complaining all the time. It says in Philippians, it says, don't grumble. Like Philippians 2, it says, don't live your life grumbling. Do all things without grumbling or disputing. Don't live in that place of complaining. See, then complaining, we're on this unfairness wheel. We get stuck on this cycle. We get stuck on this wheel. When we're trying to figure out what's fair in my life, the problem is it leads to this end part. This is a bad place to be. Number 3 is cursing. Now, I'm not talking about swearing, although swearing is wrong and you should not do it. In the Bible, when there was a moment when someone said, and they cursed, cursing in the Bible means to speak not life, but death upon something. That's like a big deal. Can you imagine someone speaking death upon someone else? Like they wish they didn't exist. They wish that they would just die. That's a big deal. Now you might think, oh, I couldn't do that. There's no way. Well, a lot of times when we let that comparison and that complaining to just build up over time, what happens is we stop loving people and wishing the best for them, and we start developing hate in our hearts. Start developing anger. Now, Job, he was in a moment where he had something to compare to, right? Some people have houses and kids and families and flocks, but I have nothing now. And then he had something to complain about. God, this is annoying. This is stupid. Why is this happening, God? He has something to complain about. But see, he doesn't stay on the wheel. He doesn't stay on this cycle. His wife, who was still alive, this is what she said to him. Job 2:9. His wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Just curse God and die. Maintaining your integrity, that means being a good person. She's like, why are you still being a good person when God did this to you? Just curse him and die. You know that if Job cursed God, God wouldn't be affected by it. Like it's not like God would be hurt, like physically hurt. You can't beat up God. So why is she saying to do this? She's saying it's okay to have hatred in your heart. Wow. That's terrible. She's saying, listen, you can't even, it doesn't matter. You can't touch God, you can't affect God, but who cares? Embrace the hatred that you have. Embrace the anger that you have. It's good to have that. That's what Job's wife is saying. Curse God and just die. Can you imagine you're like a wife saying that to her husband? Just die. Just curse God and die. Sounds like she has some hatred in her heart too. Just curse God and die. When we get stuck on this wheel, this unfairness wheel, this cycle of bad thought, we can get so caught up in comparing to other people. Is this fair? Is this not fair? And then when we don't feel like it's fair, what we do is we start to complain. And then instead of being grateful for what God gives us or just accepting the things that God gives us, we get prideful and we say, this is wrong, they're wrong. And we start to develop hatred in our heart. Luckily, Job didn't do that. He trusted God. And you know what? God never explained to him. He never explained to him. But he still trusted and had faith that God knew the bigger picture. God saw the end. He saw he would help him. When it didn't feel like God was helping, when he said, I feel like God's choking me out, I feel like God's just throwing me into the mud, I still will not curse you because I love you. I trust you. And that's tough to do when you're in pain. It's tough to do when things you don't feel like are fair. But it's not about fairness, it's about faith. And faith means that you're trusting in God when you can't see like it's going good at all. Faith means you'll go, okay, God, listen, this is a not good situation, but I still trust you. And God might never explain it to you the way you want. There have been things in my life where I'll be like, why did this happen, God? And you know what? He has not explained it to me at all. But it's helped me actually trust him more. Be like, okay, you don't have to explain everything to me. I know I'm not the boss. You're the boss. But I will still trust you. I will still trust you. What does Job say back to his wife when she says this? Let's read this next verse, Job 2:10. He told her, "You're talking like an empty-headed fool." Wow. He's calling her dumb, is what he's saying. He says this, "We take the good days from God. Why not also the bad days?" Look, it's easy for us to ask for blessings from God. And for the good days, why, though, shouldn't we also take the bad days? Not once through all this did Job sin, and he said nothing against God. Another version says he did not curse God. So he didn't develop hatred in his heart against God. Even though he had something to compare to, and he had something possibly to complain about, people would say, oh, that's a good excuse to complain. He still didn't let it just develop and get stuck on that wheel, get stuck on that unfairness wheel until it developed into anger and hatred. When I was younger, and I would work, what my parents would do is I'd make money, and what they'd say is, okay, give me money that you made so that we can set it aside. Now in that moment, I'm like, but I just made this money. And they'd be like, well, we want to take a portion. And it felt so unfair. And I'd get money, I'd be like, oh, I got paid. They'd be like, okay, give me 10. And I'd give them 10. I'd be like, this is unfair. I had to give them something? This is unfair. Why do I have to? This is my money. Job didn't ask to give God all that stuff that was taken from him. I would get another paycheck. They'd say, give me 10. I'd be like, oh, this is unfair. I don't feel like this is fair for me. This is my money. I should be able to do with what I want. Next paycheck, give me 10. Next paycheck, give me, until I finally just continue to give. And I wasn't giving because I wanted to be honest. I felt like it was unfair. But what I didn't realize was because I had continued to give, there was something left over. They were saving it for something. They were putting it away so that I didn't just spend that 10, but I could turn that 10 into 100. Because I was willing to trust in that moment. My parents, even if it didn't feel fair that they're taking my money, I should be able to do with what I want with my money. They're taking my money from me. They didn't even give me the choice. They're just taking it from me. But because they did that, I had things later. See, I want us to really understand this. Just because God never explains why things are unfair to you now, you have heaven to get as your reward. That doesn't mean everything will work out just like you want it to here on earth. You know what? It might not. I'm just going to be honest. It might not work out good. It might be bad. It might be painful. Life is going to be hard. But guess what? It says in Romans 8, "For I consider the sufferings of this present time." What's the present time? Here on earth. I consider the sufferings of this present time. They are not worth comparing. Hear that word? Comparing to the glory that has been revealed to us. That glory, where does that come from? That is in heaven. God reveals himself to us, but we get rewards in heaven. Trust me, when Job got up to heaven, he probably had a way bigger mansion. He probably had way more. And the pain that he experienced, it doesn't matter compared to the amazing moments in heaven he can have. So even though he might look back and be like, well, that time on earth maybe wasn't fair, it doesn't matter because look at where I'm at. Look at the promises that God has given me. Look at the things that I can have. it's hard to see that when we're in pain. It's hard to trust when we're in pain. It's hard to have faith when all we're doing is comparing and asking, is this fair? It's not fair. It's just not. Some have more, some have less. Some are hurt more, some are hurt more, some are hurt less. Some are more angry or have bad situations, and there's no comparison. But you can know, no matter where you're at, that you can always have faith in God, and He will help you and He will love you. And it might not be the things that you want here. He might not explain Himself the way that you desire, but in the end, it will be good. It will be good. You might be like, this is unfair. I have to give this. Yeah, it probably is. You might have a good point on earth, but God sees the bigger picture. We have to trust in Him. So can you bow your heads and close your eyes? Life isn't fair. Things in our life aren't fair. Moments that we have aren't fair. So God wants to give us a heart that's willing to just have faith. So if you're here in this moment and you are wanting to accept Christ, you're wanting to say, listen, I want to have faith even though I don't feel like it's fair. Or you're saying, I know God, but I just get caught up in this unfairness cycle where I compare to other people. I'm constantly complaining, and I know that it can even lead, maybe it has led to cursing in my life, which means that you are just not wanting love or life for other people, but you're just speaking hatred for them. I want us to pray this prayer, and God wants to do a work in you this morning. So say this with me. Say, Jesus, I believe and have faith even when it doesn't seem fair, because I know you see the bigger picture. Just like Job, we're all going to go through pain. What I can learn is that in the end, you know what's best, and you love me in the midst of it all. We love you, Jesus, in your name. Everyone said, amen. Amen. Come on, give a clap. Give a clap.